Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And welcome to yet another Lynn Cullen Live, or Still Alive. And it is March 21. It's spring. And it looks like spring, and it feels like spring. And for many, there's a spring in their step. And I've been reading stories about how old farts are out celebrating, going to restaurants, having parties because they're fully vaccinated. And I can't imagine how sort of annoyed that might make people who don't have there's the word. It could be a number of words I'm looking for, that don't have the good fortune to be an old fart. You know, often age doesn't give you much to crow about, but it has in the instance of this horror, this pandemic, and the availability of vaccines certainly given old folks the ability to get to the head of the line. And those who are not at the head of the line can be understandably, I would think, annoyed or envious, or I don't know. And if those people are having bad feelings toward their elders, I don't blame them. I don't. I so want everybody to feel the lessening of anxiety that comes with having had the vaccine. On the other hand, the anxiety isn't lessened for all of those that you care about that still don't have it. So until everybody gets it, the anxiety level will remain high and should. The thing is, since day one, there hasn't been a lot of certainly uniformity, but also a lot of sort of sense about how we've gone about dealing with not just the pandemic, but then the miracle of the vaccine being invented, created in an extraordinary time frame. But I am starting to read, and I'm sure many of you are, that if we bother to look beyond our own noses, beyond our own good fortune, perhaps, if we have the vaccine, beyond our own families, beyond our own country, then you sober up real fast. Because there are literally billions of human beings, many of them old, who are waiting and don't even have a glimmer of a hope of a vaccine. And they are waiting in large part by a virtue of an accident of birth. They were born on the wrong continent. Shame on them. They were born in Africa. They were born in South America. Billions left behind. Probably not going to be getting the vaccine until as late as 2023. And the drug companies who make the vaccines are turning away all kinds of offers of help from those countries who could ramp up production. I read a story this weekend about the head of a pharmaceutical company in Bangladesh, one of the poorer countries of the world. And he has a facility that has the capacity to fill 600 to 800 million doses of coronavirus a year. And he has written and emailed and begged and called the heads of Moderna and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson and all the others and said, please let us help. He has never gotten any word back from them. The drug companies who developed the vaccines have sold almost all of their first doses to rich countries. Well, ain't that the way it is? The rich are always first in line, and you live in a rich country, so you have the benefit of that privilege. So the United States and European countries and a few other wealthy nations have had access. And the drug companies are refusing the help of others because they do not want to share any of the proprietary technology that they have developed in creating the vaccine. They have a monopoly on their individual vaccines. And that monopoly is worth, wow, you can only imagine. And so we in America have been told that those of us who want to be vaccinated will in all likelihood be vaccinated by July. And the rest of the world? Not so much. Not even the first vaccination at that point for some entire countries. And here again is the short-sightedness of the selfishness of what is this current reality. A virus, how many times do we have to repeat this? A virus does not know from border lines. A virus does not know about geography. A virus just knows it wants to get into as many people, hosts, as it can. And then it wants to do its thing. And it wants to replicate. And it wants to create variants. And if you have an entire continent like Africa that is essentially going to be a breeding ground for coronavirus, because it won't be so happy here in the United States or in Europe where where there's just not as many wonderful opportunities, then the virus is going to Africa where it's going to go gangbusters and it's going to mutate. And those variants could well, at some point, some variant is going to prove to be very resistant to these vaccines. And since we live in this interconnected world, we know what then happens. It comes back and it spreads. So it does not make any sense for rich countries to think that they can vaccinate their own people and wash their hands of this. It doesn't work that way. And it wasn't supposed to work that way. in the early days of the pandemic, a vaccine sharing, and this is before there was a vaccine, but the World Health Organization and others tried to create a structure for if the miracle of a vaccine should come, how would we ensure that exactly what has happened wouldn't, that just rich people would have access. And so this group called COVAX, I believe is the anagram of it, and I'm sorry I can't tell you what it stands for, but who cares? It was a global vaccine sharing initiative, and it was meant to prevent this unequal access, and it was going to do it by negotiating vaccine deals on behalf of all the nations who were part of the initiative. So countries would join, agree that this was the right way to do this, and then they would, in a group, negotiate. So it wasn't just the United States negotiating for its own. It'd be the United States and the UK and African nations all negotiating with these vaccine makers. Richer nations, they figured, would purchase their vaccines through COVAX, this group that was formed. And poorer nations would get equitable supply for free. But guess what? Human nature. Rich nations, including us, quickly, I mean, in the blink of an eye, undermined the entire program by racing to secure separate deals directly with the pharmaceutical companies and with, of course, the people of their nations cheering. And the reality is there are some countries, not us yet, that have actually reserved enough doses of vaccine to immunize their own populations over and over again. So much for sharing. So, as usual, I look at humanity. There is this glory of the scientists who can create this vaccine when it should have taken 5, 6, 7, 8 years, or maybe not at all. They could do it. There's the glory of that brilliance of the knowledge that humans have accumulated. And then there's just the primitive reality of the way we're wired, which is a kind of very selfish survival. And then you get to, so who can get the vaccine that is available? Even if you're living in the wrong, I'm looking at a map. And it shows in blue the 43 countries, almost all of them very high income countries, who will probably have their populations vaccinated within a year. We're one of them. Much of Europe, not all. One country in Africa, that looks like Morocco to me, And it looks like one country in South America. And that looks like Chile. Meanwhile, that's 43 countries. There are 148 countries who've barely seen a dose. And some countries have absolutely zero. And so people in this country who are being vaccinated, who have next to no, I mean, they're probably going to be okay, they're isolated, whatever. They get the vaccine, but somebody a world away in terrible, terrible jeopardy does not. The New York Times made a list of like who can get the vaccine, where, and even within our own country, of course, this insanity continues of where in line you stand. A 16-year-old in Mississippi can get the vaccine. 16-year-old here, not if they're following the rules. A 70-year-old, get this, in Shanghai cannot get the vaccine, nor a 90-year-old in South Korea, because some of these countries have not prioritized the old. I guess they figure they're old, who cares? But it's weird because you think of Chinese culture and South Korean culture as venerating the old. So I'm a little confused about that. There's not a soul in Haiti, as far as we know, who has the vaccine. Not a soul in Papua New Guinea. No one in, as I said, 67 countries in the world has had even a single dose. Who can get this precious thing? Any member of Congress. The extended family of the deputy health minister in Peru. A smoker in Illinois, but not a smoker in Georgia. A pregnant woman in New York, but not a pregnant woman in Germany. A grocery worker in Oklahoma can get a vaccine, but next door in Texas, tough for that grocery worker. And on and on and on. I mean, you read this and your head starts to spin. And you know what? This is what happens when we're incapable of working together. That's what happens. It's law of the jungle. It's everyone for themselves. And of course, then, in that situation, the rich are going to prevail, and the poor are going to go begging. So I find that depressing. I read news a lot, so I find lots of things depressing. The New York Times was wondering whether or not this experience of the pandemic has changed us in different ways. I was talking to a friend the other day about how it has changed us. I would hope, I know this is ridiculous, I hope that we've learned important things. Like, you don't need to be part of that rat race that we were all in. You know that? We've learned how to be a little more settled. There's some good things about that. I would hope we'd come out of this learning to be grateful to hang on to the good stuff. But I don't know. We seem a pretty dense lot to me. So the Times asked some people, okay, so you went through this pandemic. Did it change you politically? That's what they were interested in. And lo and behold, yeah, of course. Now, what would you think? You would think, well, I'll tell you. I was reading some of them, and, who knows what they didn't tell me what the real numbers were of who bothered to write in and say it. But the letters that they got were from a lot of former Democrats and former Republicans. So that people on both sides found themselves unhappy with the side they've been on and moved. So one woman wrote that, I've been a Republican all my life, voted for Trump twice. And then she talks about how she became disillusioned. She would turn to Trump's press briefings, COVID briefings, and she said they didn't make any sense. And so she started watching Andrew Cuomo, in a better time for Andrew Cuomo. Hey, by the way, speaking of that, could just all the women who he didn't harass raise their hands, and we could sort of like stop the drip, 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 drip? Wow. If you were one of the women and you turned out to be the 15th who came out of the woodwork, would you even bother? I mean, at some point, would you say, why should I subject myself to this? Looks like he's gotten. I don't know. But anyway, this woman starts watching Cuomo and says, my God, he comforted me. And I couldn't even listen to Trump anymore. He sounded like a moron. She voted for him twice. She didn't notice he was a moron. Well, anyway, the good news is she's so happy Biden's there. And she'll probably be a Democrat now. And then there's this woman. She was a Democrat until Ronald Reagan. Oh, there's a signifier. So she she's a Reagan Democrat, which means she's a Republican. And she says the pandemic has pushed her further to the right. Isn't that something? She says, despite the horrific numbers of reported deaths, I am skeptical, she says, of the actual numbers. I haven't known anyone who died. Boy, talk about somebody with a really myopic view. If it didn't happen in her little orbit, it couldn't have happened. And on these letters go, back and forth, back and forth. I want to deal with immigration, but I don't want to do it today. This is one of those subjects that it's hard for me to feel any hope because I just don't see a solution. As a country, it's clear that we don't quite have one, either party. We don't know what to do. There are so many people, desperate people. And who can blame them for thinking once Trump is gone that they got a better shot? But on the other hand, can we? You can't just throw open the doors. Or half of Central America would be here. how do you do this? I think as a country, we don't want to do it like Trump did it. It appalled us. The cruelty shamed us. But I don't know what you do. I feel the same kind of helplessness looking at the suffering and looking at those in power look so powerless and so befuddled. And I think of the way I feel about Israel and Palestine. Same thing. I don't see an end. I don't see a way out. So I back away a lot. I'll try to take it up later when I'm not quite as despairing. Okay. Beth writes, Lynn, count yourself as very lucky. We've been trying for months to get my parents vaccinated in Pennsylvania. Wow. Both mid to late 70s and health conditions. I have them on every list we could get them on, and nothing. I've called their specialists, and they say, there's nothing we can do about this. Go on the state site. I want them to lie and say they are West Virginia residents so they can get vaccinated here, but they have refused, saying they will wait their turn because they're good people. God bless them. This is insane, right? This is insane. I know a lot of people who are younger than 70 who've been fully vaccinated. Yeah. And it's not like you. I mean, they've got a tech-savvy daughter who's, checking all the lists. And then the state just changed things again. And there aren't as many, they've taken the vaccine away from some of the drugstores that were giving them out, and they've taken them away from some of the clinics, and they've gone for bigger venues. And it just seems like, I have to say, I have not been particularly impressed. I don't know if anyone in any state has. I have not been particularly impressed with the Wolf administration in the vaccine rollout. I just have not. And I understand the logistics are a nightmare. And if you look around, everybody is struggling, but good God. So, I was anxious this weekend thinking about all of this, and I admit it. I sought refuge in some marijuana. Yeah, I smoked a little bit. It brightens my perceptions. Seriously, it just does. I feel lighter, I'm happier, I'm more engaged. A beautiful flower is even more beautiful. The sun on my skin, which felt so wonderful, feels even more wonderful. And so I did that. I've done it for over 50 years. And I'm reading Pittsburgh City paper. And I find out that Pennsylvania has made more marijuana arrests. These are possession arrests in the tens of thousands than they did the year before. Pennsylvania arrested more than 20,000 people for possession. of marijuana. This, when so many states are saying, marijuana, big deal. Come on. You got the state in the business of selling and distributing a much more potent mind-bending substance called alcohol. But when it comes to the more benign plant-based substance of marijuana, oh, hell. So they're still destroying tens of thousands of people's lives. You know what I thought as I read it? I got so furious. Ruined my high. Total bummer. I thought, you know what? I should go down and turn myself in. I should walk right over to the cops, give them what's left of this joint, and say, I'm turning myself in. It's a protest. I want you to arrest me. Because I've been doing this for 50 years. How many black people have you arrested during those 50 years for this thing that I got away with all the time? If I were younger and a little more, I don't know, into theater, I would do it. I would do it. It just sickens me. And it's more of, believe me, you want to know what white privilege looks like? Come over to my house and we'll smoke a joint. We'll smoke it out on my front porch and never have a moment of concern. I may or may not have a caller. If I do, hello?
Lynn?
Yes?
Yes, hi. Away from the marijuana subject, I want you to know I'm waiting for a ride to get my vaccine right now.
Ooh.
Finally. And you can imagine what I've gone through. And then finally one day I got two reservations from everybody that I'd been in contact with.
Yeah. That's what happens. I ended up with two, and I had to, immediately cancel the one because you want to, and that is what people are doing. And so that sort of mucks up the works.
It sure does, because it's as hard to cancel it as it is to get it in the first place.
Oh, wow. Mine wasn't, but I was easily canceled with the county health department.
Oh.
So where are you getting it?
Well, I'm getting it up at UPMC Hospital in Monroeville. That's where I'm getting the shot.
They're finally doing the right thing. Good.
Yeah. But it's taken so long. It has taken every day you sit here and dial numbers.
Isn't it awful? I know. And it's so anxiety producing, and some of us who don't have a lot of ability to handle frustration, I'm talking about me, I mean, just can't do it. I mean, I would start like throwing things at the wall. I just can't do it.
Well, I did text Governor Wolf and told him that if he were running for election, I wouldn't vote for him this year. And I've been a strong supporter of everything that he's been doing.
Yeah.
But this, I just think he's dropped the ball, and something has gone wrong someplace in Pennsylvania that we shouldn't be in this situation.
No, I agree with you totally. So I'm happy for you, and, it's wonderful. And you'll feel yourself, I mean, it'll just, you're already excited. I can hear.
Yes. Oh, yes, great. Really. To get, to have, see some friends again. That's the big thing. It's been terrible this past year not being able to meet your friends, and even I have not seen one granddaughter that I have because she, in a whole year, because she doesn't want to contact with anybody.
Sure.
And I don't blame her, but it's
I haven't seen my own mom. I haven't. My mother hasn't seen her child. That's me.
Oh,
no,
wow.
that's for over a year now. It's been over a year. I last saw her early March of last year. That was the last time I saw her.
That's about what it was been. Last March. That's when we all had to go underground.
We all burrowed into the ground.
Yeah.
Hey, so I'm so thrilled for you sharing this good news, and may others be able to have their shots soon.
Soon, I hope so. Yeah, you take care, Lynn.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Oh, God. Let's see. Dave writes, I'm 62 and larger than the average bear, so I'm sort of well, that's true. I know a young woman who got it. I mean, young, in her 20s, because her BMI. In other words, she's overweight. And that'll do it. Hey, you guys, if you're overweight, that's a pre-existing condition. But a lot of, may I just say, a lot of hefty, and I'm not obese, but I know I'm overweight. Almost everyone I know is overweight. It sort of strikes me as weird that if you're overweight and if you're a smoker, in other words, two things that, you could possibly do something about, but it shows you're not quite. You get rewarded. In Pennsylvania, you can go to the front of the line. I don't know about smoking here. Do that smokers? I don't know. See, you don't know. It's just insanity. Anyway, back to the bear here. 62, larger than the average bear, so I'm sort of qualified right now. I'm signed up with the VA and local hospital network, but nothing so far. No call from them. I finally got my first one, though, because one of the women who works at my bar does this. Your bar? You mean the one you hang in? One of the women who works at, or you own, works at my bar, does the scheduling for a group down here, and she snuck me in. So yeah, it's who you know, but not necessarily higher ups. If you know a grunt who's scheduling the shots, I know that's true. Word of mouth. Hey, this pharmacy has some, and they have they've got appointments, but at the end of the day, they might have surplus. So if you go, it's all this. And if you want, you can just scramble. Scramble online, scramble place to place. I don't know. Insane. Jeez. What we got here? I got so many stuff. Hey, the Asian stuff. Yeah. Did you know? I just want to say that I'm not in any way discounting the targeting of Asian women in this attack. But I think underplayed is the shooter's Southern Baptist, evangelical roots that were apparently the center of his life, and which made him think that I'm going to assume, made him think that his normal lustful feelings were such a damning sin that he became obsessed with stopping them. And I've been this is something that afflicts a lot of people. So I would like, I know there's always a lot when the finger pointing starts. I would like a lot of religious groups, because it's not just evangelicals. It's a lot of, it's Protestants, it's Catholics, God knows, it's, I'm sure, Orthodox Jews. The other Jews, not so much. That demonize this basic human need and function and makes us crazy. I find that a very compelling story. I really do. And I think I'll wait tomorrow till Susan pops up to maybe talk more about that. I'm saving immigration and Asian racism because it's so real and they've seemingly been so quiet. But this is another group that ain't white in America that is now speaking out about what it's like not to be white Christians and heterosexuals in this country. And it is not a walk in the park. So I'm glad that awakening has come. And there's a fascinating story. Again, I think we'll get into it tomorrow, about how it's harder in some ways for the Asian American community, which, by the way, is the fastest growing demographic in America. Asian Americans now represent, I think I saw, is it 6 or 8% of the population, which is sure as hell a lot more than Jews. So they way surpassed my little group. But the thing about them is they are either at the highest strata, they're making tons of money as an ethnic group and as a racial group. They have the highest median incomes in the country, more than whites, more than blacks, more than anybody else. But on the other hand, they're either way up there or they're living in total poverty. And those two groups of Asian Americans don't necessarily pal around together, which would always be true, right? Because status and class and education often trump skin color and or ethnicity. And then again, you think of it, Asians, they come from how many different countries? We're talking about just tons of countries, different languages, different cultures. And they're supposed to feel like they're all in this together. But after 9/11, man, Sikhs found out that Americans couldn't tell the difference between someone like them and Muhammad Atta. The vulnerability is there whether you're a CEO of some Silicon Valley behemoth or you're some poor woman working in a massage parlor or doing nails, right? The racist on the street can't tell the difference. So that is something that, Kurt, I heard this. Kurt said, frustrating as the vaccine situation is, the state's doing okay. It's second best vaccination rate per capita in the country. I saw that claim, and forgive me for saying fake news. I find that very hard to believe. And since I really do, I did see that, and I find it hard to believe. But who could be? Who it could be? I don't know. And then Kurt says on pot privilege and drugs in general, I've always said black kids go to jail, white kids go to rehab. Yeah. Sickening. Bob says, I wasn't aware there was a mask protest this weekend in Pittsburgh. Oh, yeah, there were some really, there was about, 150 people demanding their freedom, walking maskless with American flags downtown. And I believe, yes, Wendy Bell was one of the main speakers. Of course. Yeah. That's one of those things you don't even want to know. Henry, this is another thing I've been hearing about. Henry says, I have two friends in their 50s who got their Johnson & Johnson shots in Ohio. And I have heard from more than one person that Ohio welcomes Pennsylvanians. I have heard that too. Ohio's only restrictions, I'm told, is that you have to be 50 or older. Henry says, I'm 61 and overweight, and I was able to get my shot. I'm taking that here in Pennsylvania. Okay, yeah. And my second shot was on Friday. They do not weigh you or ask for an obesity diagnosis. It's on the honor system. Well, they can also look. I mean, do you look svelte or do you look like you're packing on a few pounds? I mean, I always look, and since COVID, my God, I've easily gained, I think, about 15 pounds. I keep meaning to take it off, and I maybe take 1 or 2 off, and then I boomerang and start heading in the other direction again. Well, I'm glad for you, Henry. I just, I said at the beginning when people started saying, I got my shot. I started saying, maybe you should just be quiet about that because, again, it's such a minority still of people. And the vast majority of people are anxious and waiting and stuck in this craziness of a system that just doesn't really work. It's everyone for themselves. There should be one place. This is why if you had public health, you would have a system. You wouldn't have to be making calls. The federal government would say, okay, and now we're doing blah, blah, blah. That's the way it would work. They would get in touch with you. There wouldn't be a way for you to be losing your mind. CVS has them. Giant Eagle has them. Ohio can get. West Virginia, perhaps. I don't know. I heard there was this drugstore over on, in Belts Hoover. And did you hear that? Yeah. How the hell is anybody supposed to navigate that? I read a story that I thought was, I loved it because it's so unlikely. It's about a woman. Talk about an old fart. She makes me feel young. She's 89 now, and she lives in northern India. And she's become a feminist icon. of sorts. And she is the most unlikely person to. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of her, and she's got, a head covering on. She's got a long, long skirt. She looks like the grandmother she is, great-grandmother she is. She came of age, grew up, and still lives in a rural area. But what happened is, she once, with a granddaughter, went to check out this shooting range. It was 1999. She went to check out a shooting range. The guns were all air pistols. But the guys who founded the shooting range believed that maybe this would be a good thing for the young children of the area, a sport that could help, give them something to do. And so he said he would, to get the word out, he said he's holding a contest. People can come. And they were going to give away 50 air guns as prizes. And so kids said to I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. And she took her granddaughter to the range. When they got there, whoops, they saw that everybody else was male. And Shefali, the girl, the granddaughter, who was 12, felt very nervous. And she said to her granddaughter, look, don't be nervous. Just watch me. And she picks up one of the guns and fires. Bullseye. That was the first time she had ever picked up a gun. The guy who's running the thing says, hey, wow, look, this old lady just got a bullseye. And all the guys were looking over with some, whatever men feel when old women beat them. And he figured it was a fluke. So he said, shoot that again. And she did. And yep, bullseye. And that was the beginning. She ended up, of course, winning one of the guns. She was scared out of her mind if her family found out that she had fired a gun. She continued to pretend she was a chaperone of her granddaughter, and they continued to go. And man, she got better and better and better. This is a woman who grew up in a rural, patriarchal culture in which women had nothing. She never went to school because girls didn't. She was married off at 15. She spent the next 50 years raising her family, raising grandchildren. And she said, the farthest I ever went was out to the fields to give the men their lunch. So these, what became weekly visits, these clandestine visits to the shooting range, was the first time in her life that she was doing something. First of all, taboo. And then totally, really, for herself. She felt such excitement every time she picked up one of those guns. she confided in her sister-in-law, who joined her and the granddaughter, and the three of them just became addicted. The guy who founded this shooting range decided to create a team from the village. And there was a championship being held in Punjab state, which was about 130 miles away. And several of the children were selected, including the granddaughter. And the old lady, by the way, her name is Chandra Tomar. She went along as a chaperone. The first time in her life she had ever been outside her state. I mean, this was 130 miles away, unbelievable. And again, unknown to the rest of her family, she participated in the veteran category. The only woman. And freaked her out because these weren't air guns. She was given a real firearm. I wish I could tell you she won the gold medal. She won the silver medal. And when they got home, she knew she was going to be in trouble because a local newspaper published an article with their photographs. Her granddaughter had won, she had won, and she says, my husband, his brothers were very angry. And they forbade her to go anymore to the range. She said, I listened to them quietly, but I decided I'm going to keep going. So this old woman, who's then, what? She's in her 70s at that point. This woman who had only known this sort of repressive patriarchy in which she had no say, no agency, no ability to live her own life, a conservative community, that's all she knew, where women covered their heads and even their faces when speaking to men. You're taught to avoid eye contact with any men. You know what she did? She started going door to door in her village to encourage families to let their daughters learn this wonderful skill. And so she ends up creating this huge group of young women, also in this patriarchal culture. And the men were flummoxed, especially because this team of girls started winning. And the jeers that had initially greeted them turned to cheers, admiration. In fact, this little town has now produced almost 30 national level shooters. And Chandra Tomar, age 89. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of her medals. It's like if you were looking at Michael Phelps' bedroom. I mean, it is that many. Chandra Tomar, isn't that something? She's known all over the country now. She's celebrated. She does speaking engagement And her family is now building a shooting range for underprivileged children so they will have more access to the sport. She's almost 90 years old. She doesn't wear glasses. And she touched her toes so the reporter could see how flexible she is. And she says it's important to stay active. Your body might grow old, but keep your mind sharp. This from the sharp shooter. Anyway, so that story lifted my spirits. I hope it lifted yours. And I see we're out of time. So we'll talk tomorrow. I know I've already said we got 2 heavy-duty subjects on tap, but things can change. So who knows? Have a wonderful day. Enjoy this sun and warmth and spring. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.